So welcome to this, what number are we at now, Michael? Is it the 14th or the 15th episode? I think it might be the
I
15th episode.
think it's the 15th episode,
Okay.
Oliver. Yeah.
The 15th episode of Heydorn and Watson, and today we're going to be looking at uh, social credit and what it means for the family, both in terms of its diagnosis under the existing system, and what it would do for the family if we actually had a social credit monetary reform in place. So perhaps the best place to start would be to recognize how difficult it is for many families, especially for larger families, to exist under the existing financial system. I was just reading a book recently this week by the author Michael O'Brien, where he describes the existing financial system as being diabolical as
Mm-hmm.
far as far as as far as families are concerned, as far as family life is concerned. Why? Because it is extremely difficult to support a family on one income, and even with two incomes, it can be quite onerous if those people are not making large sums of money. So,
Mm-hmm.
and it's strange how this has sort of degenerated over time. I mean, there was a time not so long ago, 30, 40, 50 years ago, when a one income earner, a one income family could survive well enough, decently enough. And as time has gone on, it's become necessary for two incomes, and in some cases also for the teenagers to have part-time jobs, etc. Everyone's got to be working just in
Mm.
order to keep oneself in the game, not necessarily even to be prosperous, if you should be so lucky, but just to sort of survive.
Mm.
And I think
Yeah.
that this is basically the way it is all throughout the Western world. In some countries it's worse than others. I think in the United States it's particularly bad,
Oh yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
because they don't have the same social supports that you would
No.
find in other countries. Like here in Canada, at least if you have children, you're making less than a certain amount of money, the government will give you some sort of child support, child credit
Yeah.
for each child that you have under a certain age.
That's
That
right.
would be unheard of in the United States, at least for
Yeah.
the vast bulk of the population.
That's right. It's the same in Australia too.
Mm-hmm.
So here they get family tax benefits. So it's
Mm-hmm.
incremental. So if you're earning under your specified amount of income, you'll receive family tax benefit payments for each child,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
as to assist with the cost of raising children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we don't have the financial system that we have in place, and the economic regime that we live under is not family friendly. It's not
No,
supportive of families. In fact, the truth of it is that the way things operate now, it actually is very much anti-family.
hmm
And
that's
so,
right.
one general point that I want to make is that any group, any association, any organization, any church, any any individuals who claim to be pro-family
hmm
by necessity, need to be in favor of an economic financial system that is pro-family, and that implies that they ought, if they understood how the present system works, then they ought to be opposed to the present system because it is making it very difficult for families to form, making it very difficult for families to survive and flourish.
Yeah,
And the system that we have is in so many ways implicated in the breakup and the of families and the breakdown of families. And so, it's sort of, in one sense, it's sort of pointless to speak platitudes about how wonderful families are and how we need to be supporting families and we need to have more families when the policies, the financial and economic
mm,
policies under which we live, are anti-family. Those are the things before else it needs to change. We need to change policy so that there's actually some weight behind these words when politicians and others say that they want to be supporting families or protecting families or nourishing family life, etc.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. When it comes to supporting families, as you said, one really needs to put money where his mouth is, and support a reform of the economic and financial system. I mean, you can talk about family values all you like, and talk about enacting this or that particular social policy in favor of the family. But if you don't reform or change the core of the problem, this economic and monetary system, you're going to, families are going to run into problems, they're going to run into obstacles, and they're going to struggle, and they're going to collapse and not form altogether. Yeah. The family, as it has been understood throughout the history of mankind, is the first building block of any civilization or society. Everything starts with the family. So you have the family, and then you have the nation. The family is the first. It's sort of it's its own nation. It's its own household or kingdom or what have you. Its own realm. And then you have many other families with their own realms or states.
Right.
And then they come together and form the state, which is put there to serve them, and also the economic system, the means of exchange of goods and services, is supposed to be at the service of families.
Right.
Unlike today, where it's the other way around, where we'll forget families altogether. The family has been at least in the last, well, I wouldn't even see in the last 50 years, I'd say the last 100 years, has been gradually, systematically eroded and destroyed by this corrupt and, as Brian would say, diabolical financial system that is designed to discourage the formation of families and to put so much pressure and difficulty in the way of families that do form. One cannot help but think, well, is this financial system we have, is it truly, it's unnatural.
Yes, and it's scary to think where we might be headed. I mean, is the end game to so erode the family, so destroy the family, that we really just become completely atomized individuals with no family connections, who our only relationship to other human beings would be through the mechanism of the state, right? So the state becomes all powerful, and there are no sort of subordinate or smaller groups and associations, especially natural associations like the family, that could meet people's needs, right? So then, in that case, the only thing you can do is turn to the almighty state for everything. And one aspect of that, of course, is, we've talked about this before, but because everyone's got to work, or there's a lot of, let me put it this way, there's a lot of pressure put on families that both parents have to work. If you can get away with only one parent working, I think it's better, but there's certainly a lot of pressure put on the family now, financial pressure, where both mother and father have to work. What ends up happening then, of course, is that the children end up being raised outside of the family. They end up being raised in commercial daycare centers, which in various jurisdictions, like in Quebec, for example, is heavily subsidized by the state using taxpayer funds. And so, we have to ask the question, what sort of society are we creating right? We're creating
Exactly.
where more and more of what used to be done within the family is now being done by businesses or by the state.
Yeah, that's right. Well, here's the whole complete and utter insanity of the thing.
Hmm.
And then it's another aspect of this diabolical financial economic system we have is the policy of full employment.
Mm-hmm.
The policy of full employment, which especially today in an age of automation is just it's a diabolical means of enslavement and destruction of the family structure, of families, of character, of culture, and even the individual for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
And and what is so utterly insane about this policy of full employment today is the fact that despite the fact that technology and computers and machines are doing more and more and more of the jobs, more of the labor, the work that is required to provide all necessary goods and services, despite that, governments and big business and the politicians continue to, or have more so in the last 50 years, imposed a policy that both parents should or have to work.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how insane is that? That's
Yes.
just madness. The place has lost its way if it's doing that. In an age where people should be working less, don't need to be working as much,
Mm-hmm.
and it's no longer sustainable to keep every man and woman employed,
Mm-hmm.
fully employed.
Mm-hmm.
They insist on this policy of full employment, and now as a result of that, you have this desperate, atomized, destroyed, broken populace brutally competing with each other for jobs to
Mm-hmm.
survive. And then,
Yes.
of course, you have both parents working, which is destructive towards the children's upbringing because the children are separated from their parents, from their mothers and fathers, often raised in commercial daycare centers, as you said, and which I'm sure a majority of daycare center workers, I'm sure they'd have the best intentions in mind for the children, but when you've got group care situations like that, the children, especially young children like babies and toddlers, aren't always going to get the attention they need when they've got so many other children being cared for. Let's say one daycare worker to 10 children or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really, this policy of full employment is just, it's destructive towards
the
family
family.
life, the family structure, and ultimately civilization, and it will be its downfall. You destroy the family, and you destroy civilization.
Yes.
Just that simple. It is pure science.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
one thing I was going to mention, because there are a lot of ironies here. You talk about full employment. C.H. Douglas, of course, was critical of full employment decades ago, right? In the 20s and the 30s, the 40s, etc. And yet, at that time, full employment generally meant the full employment of men. And he was
That's right.
saying even at that level of technology, it wasn't justified,
Yeah,
for them to have full
that's right.
employment. And yet, so many decades later, as technology has advanced incredibly in the interim,
Mm.
now not
Mm.
only have we not liberated ourselves from the full employment policy where men are concerned, it's been extended to women.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And one of the things that it's done, we've made this point before, but we'll make it again because it bears repeating. One of the things that it's done is it's actually resulted in out of control real estate prices in many
Yep.
jurisdictions. Why? Because if you have two incomes in a family rather than just one income like we used to have decades ago, but you have both mother and father working, both husband and wife, if they're married, working,
Mm.
then the banks are in a position to lend more money, which we can then all take and go and compete in the real estate market for houses, which does what? It ends up bidding up the price of housing. So it ends up bidding up the
Yeah.
price of housing. So, why is it I was just looking at an article just this past week about how much income you need in order to buy a house in various Canadian cities. And in some places, it's completely insane. I mean, Vancouver is the worst, of course. Toronto isn't much better, where you might need, the household has to bring in more than $100,000 in order for you to have a chance of actually getting a mortgage to buy a property. So, so it's ironic in a sense because the women went into the workforce in order to gain more money, but actually because it puts the banks in a position where they can lend more money, it has driven up the cost of housing, right? So that a large portion then of the second salary of the woman's salary is not improving the standard of living, it's just being absorbed in mortgage payments.
That's right.
And at the same time, what has happened is that by doing this, they've actually put more pressure then on those who are not in the workforce or who are trying to survive on one income, put more pressure on them to join in doing what other people are doing, because if you're only making less, let's say you're making less than six figures, you've got one income, you have no hope in many markets of getting a house. So it puts more pressure on single family earners to get the wife then to go out to work as well. You see, and so that becomes the norm because people can't survive otherwise.
Yeah.
So it's and then of course, whether it's the husbands or the wives, if they have children, they still have all the domestic duties that they would have had.
That's right.
Childcare duties or just maintaining
the
household,
cooking, cleaning, and running the household.
Yes.
That's right.
So those things still need to be done, and they'll have to pay someone to do it or do it themselves on top of their work, which then, of course, takes even more time away from the family. So it's all very ridiculous, really.
And they have to eat out more often. You can't cook at home. I mean, even then, even when the wife does go out to work, the cost of her going out, if they've got even just two children, the cost of her going out to work is even that itself cost is astronomical, because then they've got to pay for daycare fees, and that can be astronomical. It can go up into thousands per week, and and then they've got to have a second car, and they've got to buy uniforms and lunches and all, and coffees and all that sort of thing that they do at work. So it's often the case, especially if the wife is, if she's on a lower income, even then it would be pointless. Yeah, what's the net benefit? There would be no economic gain in her going out to work, because it'd just be cancelled out by the daycare fees and the costs of going to work.
Plus, the increases in mortgage expenses.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So it's a lot of it is very self-defeating, and it's also sort of a positive feedback loop that the more you do it, the worse it becomes, which is the more you have to do it to try to keep yourself afloat, which is the worse it becomes, and so on and so forth. One of the other things I wanted to point out in this connection too is that if you have this idea that everybody has to work, then of course everyone, men and women, they have to invest in education, get diplomas, degrees, whatever it is, in order to secure some kind of career for themselves. And so what effect does this have on women? Well, it means that many women in the Western world put off forming a family or having children for many years, because they've got to have their education and they have to start their careers. And this also is destructive of the family, because women in general, many of them don't seem to realize this, but they really only have a small window where they are fertile and can have children. So
that's right.
If you say that people aren't going to get married before 20, then basically what they're looking at is between 20 and 40. They've got 20 years.
That's right.
Of
just
maybe not even
long,
maybe not even that much.
Yeah.
Yes, some women can have children after 40, but it becomes more difficult. And so some women have
That's right.
difficulty having children at 37, 38. So,
Yeah,
it's
that's right.
looking at 15 to 20 years really where they can actually have children.
Yeah,
And if they um, put off having children because, the economic security has to come first and they have to get that education and then start that career and establish the career solidly so that they can continue. What's happening is in many cases, I don't know what the stats are on this, but I know plenty of people in this situation, women, they get to be about 35 and they're finally ready, they're finally in a position to get married and have a family. But, you know, they find that as far as the marriage marketplace is concerned, and I
mm.
hate to think of it as a market. I think that's the wrong attitude, but there is some truth.
Mm.
There is
Yes,
some truth to that. As far as the marriage
yes,
marketplace is concerned, they find that they're no longer in demand because
that's right.
their fertility is rapidly declining. So it's very and many of them are starting to realize just how diabolical that is. That they're sort of sold
Hmm.
goods and then realize that the goods aren't
That's
what
right.
they're advertised to be.
Well, that's right. And then they'll go and get these fancy degrees that are sold to them. They think they're the bee's knees, they're the rite of passage, and then they find they get to the end of the tunnel, the degree tunnel, and they get the piece of paper, and they go to apply for jobs, and they find they can't get jobs,
Mm.
or if they do, they're often not quite as well paid as what they were promised,
Mm-hmm.
and then they're loaded with debt
Mm-hmm.
that they can't pay off or take a very long time to pay off.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it ends up being, especially today when we've got another one of the ridiculous aspects of our economic financial system where everyone or a lot of people, most people are expected to go to university or college and get these degrees because they think that's the way to get a get a good paying job. Well, when you've got so many people going for them, you end up with what's called education inflation, and then they get out of university and they find out the degree's pretty well useless.
Mm-hmm.
So and they're loaded with debt, and think about how detrimental all that college university debt would be. How detrimental that would be to starting a family. They're
Yes.
already loaded with debt by the time they're supposedly ready to start a family.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And so, we can understand why fewer and fewer people are getting married. Why, if they are getting married, they're getting married much later in life, and if they are having children, they're having fewer and fewer children. Under this system, I would even say, in the Western world, that to have a large family in the Western world today probably requires heroic virtue.
Mm.
You know.
Yeah.
Um,
You'd have to live like monks, pretty much.
yeah. Yes. So, yeah. Well, that's right. It would have to be a very Spartan sort of lifestyle,
Mm. Yeah.
and again, those who are concerned with promoting family life and who want to encourage people to have large families, is finance on their radar? Is economics on their radar, or
Yeah.
they're just living in la la land?
Well,
You know.
exactly. If they really do care about family values and you know family life, well, um, you know, you either pay attention to what's on with the financial system
Hmm.
and work on fixing that, or forget about it.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know, you're just whatever else um, whatever else you think of it is
Mm-hmm.
just it's just thoughts. That's it.
Yes.
So it's all talk and no action or real action that counts anyway.
Well,
That will
that's
really
right.
change it.
That's right. So, yeah, it's really quite very hard, I think, unnecessarily hard. You see, for people maybe that are new to social credit, you have to look at it this way. Look at our resources, right? Look at Australia, for example, or Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Just look at the
Mm-hmm.
material resources. It's, the material resources in both
Oh,
countries.
yeah.
It's vast. It's enormous. We could
Yes,
support many times the present population,
that's right.
right? Many times.
Yeah.
And we have all this wonderful technology, which makes it a lot easier to do things and to do them,
Mm-hmm.
more effectively, efficiently, with fewer and fewer people working, with less and less human input. And so if you look at just our physical hardware, the physical hardware of the economy, and all our economic potential resources, there's no physical reason why we can't provide everyone relatively easily with all the goods and services that they need to survive and flourish. There's no good reason for poverty. There's no good reason for
No,
scarcity. Scarcity,
no,
from a physical point of view, scarcity is a thing of the past.
that's right.
If
Exactly.
scarcity still persists as an economic phenomenon, it's because of the financial system that's been superimposed on our physical potential, which artificially restricts it and misdirects it and prevents it from actually doing what we need it to do, which is to deliver the goods and services that we require with the least amount of resource consumption and human labor. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So
That's right.
finance is the bottleneck. Finance is the great artificially limiting and I should say misdirecting force, right? And if it's
Yeah.
difficult for families to survive, it's nothing inherent to the nature of things. It's not because economic life is necessarily brutal and hard and it's
No,
a purely artificial financial phenomenon.
that's right.
Right?
Yeah.
And there's no good reason for it. We don't have to live this way. We ought not to live this way. And so,
That's right.
if we had a social credit financial system and you eliminate all this artificial pressure, artificial limitation, um, and you eliminate the misdirection, and the physical economy is able to do what we need it to do without being hampered, then, at
Mm-hmm.
the level of technology that we have, we should be in a position to provide more economic support for people to form families and
Absolutely.
to establish families and to expand their families than ever before
Yeah.
in human history.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Totally. So it will lead to a family would not only survive but would flourish.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And they would more likely to stay together. So families, for a start, would more likely to form because married couples, will have the necessary financial security, a basic level of financial security via the national dividend, um, in order to purchase a home and purchase all the necessary goods, services that is required
Mm-hmm.
to start and build a family, to be able to get married and and have children, start to bear children without delay, for financial reasons or whichever,
Mm-hmm.
and to have as many children as uh, uh, whatever the circumstances would give them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So and not only that, they could do it on just one income.
Mm-hmm.
So and even then, even say the father would go out to work, but maybe he wouldn't even need to work full time.
Right.
He could work just part time. So then not just the mother could stay home and raise the children properly rather than have third party commercial providers do it as they do now, but also the father would be at home more often, to be present in the home and to be able to raise the children, because that's another aspect. You see, the pressing of women and mothers into the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was bad enough.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't just start with them.
Mm-hmm.
Even in pre-industrial times, fathers of families usually, very often, they did not commute away from the home to their workplaces. They worked within the home, or at least within its immediate vicinity.
Mm-hmm.
Say on the family farm or the family shop.
Mm-hmm.
They'll have the family shop in front of the, connected to the house or whichever on the street.
Mm-hmm.
So the father would always, or for the most of the time, be present among the family to participate in the raising of children, which is just as important. Children need their fathers just as much as they need their mothers.
Right.
And that's physically present at the home, not just there on weekday evenings and on weekends.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's about what's absolutely important, absolutely imperative to families forming and staying together.
Mm-hmm.
So not suffering from divorces or breakdowns or poor relationships or poorly raised children, is that for both parents to be present together with the children.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
That's absolutely essential, and that's what's been deprived today.
Yes.
First it was the men who left the home, and now it's the women who have been taken out of the home as well.
Mm-hmm. So
and where does that leave the children?
Yes. So if that's the case, and I agree with you, that is a natural law, that those are the conditions under which children will be best off and families will be best off, then it stands to reason that we need to design a financial and economic order that will make that possible.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so we contend that social credit is that order, or a large part of that order.
Yep.
And therefore,
that's right.
Anyone who has any interest in any social question touching the family. We didn't, speak about abortion, but that's implicated too. How many abortions are done for financial reasons, directly or indirectly? So
exactly.
If we had social credit and people were getting national dividends and enjoying compensated prices, and there was much less financial pressure and less of a need to work for one's income, then a lot of the economic financial factors that are destroying people, in some cases quite literally, as is the case of abortion, or destroying families or preventing families from forming, we could eliminate all of that and in its place put in a supportive financial and economic environment in which the family would be free to, families would be free to form, to expand, to develop themselves, and so forth.
Yep, that's right. And they say, there's people, researchers who say that people's critical development, say development of their character, of their intelligence and talents and personality, happens at home in those infant and child years. But it happens in the home with the parents. That's the critical, the way they're raised by their parents as children is critical to how they will develop into mature adults.
Right.
So that's with regards to character development and personality building and develop learning valuable social skills and maturity and among many other things.
Right.
And if they're in families, in situations where they've been outsourced to commercial daycare centers, or they're in situations where they're financially insecure, they're in poverty, all that's going to be hampered. And we can see that very clearly with children grown up in broken homes or in poverty.
Mm-hmm.
Crime, suicide, delinquency, mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
Children have been deprived of parental attention due to both parents working. That's having a huge effect now.
Yes. So there's several further points we could just sort of add here. One would be, if you're correct, and I think you are correct, that the family is the basic unit of society, and therefore the basic unit of a nation. If you destroy the family as an institution, you end up destroying the society, you end up destroying the nation. So, what role do families play in the transmission of organic cultures? If you destroy the family, you destroy organic cultures. But of course, nature abhors a vacuum, and something else will come in to replace any type of organic culture that's grounded in the family, that stems from the family. And it will be some cosmopolitan, commercialized culture that serves plutocratic vested interests, which is largely what we have in the West already.
That's right, exactly. And that's one of the reasons why the private bankers, the financial oligarchs have done what they've done, forced both parents to work, engaged in implementing social and economic policies that punish and destroy families, because they want the family gone, because they want individuals atomized and crushed, grounded up into pretty well mindless drones to serve their ends.
Yes.
Mindless. There's another, what you could call perhaps free-range slaves. It's literally what we are today in the Western world. We're free-range slaves for the financial oligarchs.
Yes.
We don't have chains on our arms, but we can still walk about freely.
Yes.
But we're still slaves.
Still slaves.
Slaves
GMO. Eating GMO corn.
That's it. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, somebody should make a cartoon with that. That's a very good image. I like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing too that I was going to point out, you were talking about all the delinquency and mental illness and poverty and crime and dysfunction that all this pressure causes when families are under stress and when they're destroyed, and is that this actually, all this dysfunction actually then provides an occasion for the existing economic system to profit, because it creates jobs and it creates an excuse for the government to develop some new intervention program, some social program to solve some problem, whether it's homelessness or whatever it is.
That's right.
And so it's very insidious, because instead of preventing the problem from arising in the first place by having a sane financial system, an honest and functional financial system, we have a dishonest, dysfunctional financial system which generates all this chaos, which then the system actually requires, because the chaos becomes an excuse for further economic growth, which the system needs in order for it to maintain financial equilibrium. So we end up cannibalizing ourselves, for the sake of just maintaining financial equilibrium. Just think of all the wonderful jobs and programs and businesses that arise because of all of this dysfunction, which we wouldn't need if the dysfunction didn't exist in the first place, but which nevertheless serves the system by keeping the thing going with exponential economic growth.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's right. So we're just cannibalizing ourselves to survive, pretty much.
Basically.
All in the name of honoring the full employment sacred cow.
Honoring the full employment sacred cow, but also the idea that nothing is a free lunch, or nothing should be a free lunch, and we're committed to all of these economic dogmas that actually don't map onto the real world,
and are not even natural in a lot of ways.
No, they're not human.
Yeah. That's exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add, but it's a very wide and extensive topic, and it would be It's difficult to do full
Well,
justice to it in the 40, 50
we
minutes
could
that we
men
speak. But
yeah, we could mention that marriage breakdowns, divorces,
ah,
which have
yes,
exploded astronomically in the last 50 years, is also a result of
yes,
financial insecurity and pressures, and the obviously the policy of full employment as well. Forcing couples to spouses to compete against each other for jobs, um, or incomes and wealth and so forth. Most people have been placed in financially very precarious positions, and when things do go south and families end up in the hole, that puts pressure on married couples, and
that's
it
right.
creates conflict and
That's right.
strife,
Yep.
which often ends up in the spouses breaking up and
Yeah.
filing for divorce.
Yes, it's
So,
good that you reminded me of that because I was thinking about divorce, that we should mention divorce. So it's good that you
hmm,
mentioned it for me. Yes, I remember when I was teaching years ago, I had a student who was, I think she was a sociology major, and can't remember exactly what we were talking about, but she mentioned the fact that yes, one of the major cause for divorce is financial economic pressure.
hmm,
You know, um,
yeah,
because life has its own innate difficulties, and if on top of that you're going to add in all sorts of financial pressure, which directly or indirectly affects everything else and exacerbates other problems, then it's
yeah,
just it's just a recipe for disharmony. You know, people
yes,
uh, people
absolutely,
will start to put the blame on the other partner, or it just
yeah,
causes a lot of unnecessary stress and strain, and then natural defects become magnified, and then that puts
hmm,
more
yeah,
strain on relationships and so on and so forth. So
and all this dysfunction and disorder and conflict, financial insecurity also has led to an astronomical increase in the rate of suicides too,
hmm hmm
especially among men.
yes, yes. So like, where does the government get off saying, oh, well, we need to have suicide prevention programs, we need to invest in this and this and this? It's like, fix the bloody financial system, and
Oh,
a lot of the
exactly.
suicides that are occurring won't be occurring.
Absolutely.
And it's
That's
just
it. Yeah.
they want to put a
So
band-aid on things rather than getting at the root of the problem,
that's
right?
right. Yeah.
So yeah, and the other thing I was going to mention too is that a lot of we talk about balanced budgets. I'm actually in the process of writing an article on this. Whether it's governments or businesses or individual consumers, one of the axioms of sound finance is that we need to balance the budget. You mustn't spend more money than you're receiving as revenue or income. But the reality is that because of the price income gap, because under existing banking and cost accountancy conventions, productive organizations are generating costs and prices at a faster rate than they are simultaneously distributing income to consumers. Because of that inherent imbalance, it's
Hmm.
impossible for all economic actors to balance their budgets. I mean, when I say it's impossible, if the government balanced its budget and all businesses were always operating on that basis, where they had no long-term investments, and individual consumers were operating on the principle of the balanced budget, there would be such a lack of consumer buying power in the economy that
Mm.
businesses would not be able to cover all their costs. Some would go bankrupt, some would have to downsize, people would be laid off, we'd have a recession. So
Mm.
in order to put more buying power into consumer pockets under the existing system, the only way we can do that is by someone somewhere operating an unbalanced budget. Right?
Mm.
Someone's got to go into debt.
That's
Someone's
right.
got to spend more
Yeah.
money than they take in as revenue,
Yeah.
right? And so we all sort of, if it matters to us or if we care, we all sort of fight each other so that we're not the one that has to unbalance his budget, right? Let
Yeah.
someone else
Pretty
unbalance their
much.
budget. I don't want to be the one stuck with the debt. So
Yeah.
you have, like in Canada, I think they say the average Canadian owes a dollar, I can't remember exactly what it is, $1.70 now for every dollar he receives in disposable income. So you have many families that actually are in the hole every month,
Yeah.
right? Who aren't operating on balanced budgets, and the only way they can survive is by going into debt, going deeper and deeper
Yeah.
into debt every month,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that, of course, is not a sustainable solution long term. At some point, the debt will become too much, and they won't be able to sustain the rate of increase necessary to meet, to meet their expenses. So,
Yeah.
that's a completely unnatural and insane and ridiculous situation for any family to be in.
Yes.
But
Absolutely.
it's actually necessary under the existing financial system for at least some families to put themselves in that position. Otherwise,
Yeah.
we don't have equilibrium between consumer buying power and the rate of flow of costs and prices.
That's
Right?
right.
The social
Exactly.
credit solution, of course, is to create debt-free credit to bridge that gap and to distribute it to individuals as a national dividend and also as compensated prices. And this then would allow consumers as a whole to spend more money, which the economy needs them to do, to spend more money than they are receiving in wages, salaries, and dividends.
Yeah.
Right?
That's it.
So that's the solution. That's the solution we need to have. And in lieu of that solution, things are just going to get worse for the family, not better.
That's right. Exactly. And it's just a question of how much worse it's going to get before the whole societal edifice comes crashing down.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And it won't be
Yeah.
pretty. It won't be pretty for families when that happens either.
No, sure won't be.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So in any
Yeah.
case, that is our message on social credit and the family.
Yep.
And certainly there are all sorts of people that claim to be interested in protecting the family, promoting the family, defending the family. Well, they need to take an interest in finance and economics if they really want to help the family.
Yeah. That's right. Absolutely. They've got to put their money where their mouth is,
Yes,
as I said.
that's right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, on that note, we will sign off, and
Yep.
we will have another episode next week. Please subscribe. If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments section, and we will talk to you next week on some, or maybe in 2 weeks' time, because what's going on, Michael? You're not going to be in Australia next week.
That's right. I'll be. I'm going to be coming over your way.
That's right.
In less than a week's time.
Yes.
I'll be right where you are now.
That's right. So we're going to a conference on the basic income. We'll be talking some social credit to
Yep.
some members of the basic income community. So
Yep.
that's why you are leaving. And but at some point, maybe not next weekend because we'll be away, but at some point when we do our next show, we will do it probably from right where I'm sitting.
Yeah.
Side by side.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah.
All right.
It'll be something different.
Something different. Yes. All right. So
Yeah.
we'll leave it there and have a good night, Michael.
Yes. You too, Oliver. Likewise.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.